Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I'm back. I'm back with a brand new Naofumi What If. It kind of took forever. I had this art done probably like a month ago, I think, or something like that, maybe like 3 weeks ago. But obviously things came up and I just wasn't able to get to it. But here we are, and here I am with What If Naofumi was the legendary nine-tailed hero. This is part 1 of most likely 3. So if y'all enjoy, like as always, make sure to leave a like, leave a sub, comment down below any suggestions you have for Naofumi What Ifs, Deku What Ifs, Naruto What Ifs, Tanjiro What If, whatever What If. Leave suggestions below. And yeah, that's about it. I'm not gonna waste much more of your time, and let's just get right into the What If. Let's get it. Naofumi Iwatani, born in a similar world to yours and mine. Naofumi, though, wouldn't realize the power that would be put upon him soon to come. Naofumi was just a normal kid, a normal guy. He would go to school, he would hang out with his family. Anything you can think of that would be normal in a life, Naofumi had it. But one day, one very memorable day, Naofumi would arrive in a library. He would begin searching from book to book until he found something that was interesting to read, eventually finding the tale of the nine-tailed fox, a demon fox that would scour the land, one of the strongest, if not the strongest, of the tailed beasts, at least that were known to mankind. There was many different types of tailed beasts. There was the one tail, the two tails, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 9. At least that's what was read in the book. Naofumi, not knowing much about it, but he begins to read about this so-called nine-tailed fox. This demon fox that basically laid waste to land after land, but at the same time was abused, was tormented. The life itself that the nine-tailed fox lived was not a good one, and it was known that the nine-tailed fox would lay dormant within somebody that would eventually cure him of his hatred. Naofumi would continue flipping, but would realize there were no more pages left. Wait, no, there were pages, but they were just completely blank. He would continue flipping more and more and more, and one page alone was the last thing that he saw. All it said was Jinchuriki. That's all Naofumi saw, as a blinding flash of light would consume him and the entirety of the library. Naofumi would wake up out of nowhere in some sort of odd cloak, maybe similar to basically the garb that he saw in his little book of some sorts. He can't really think of what's going on, but he looks around to see 3 other people next to him. One with a sword, one with a spear, and one with a bow. Naofumi would be shocked and look at his body to see that he has no weaponry on him at all. All he has is weird markings that align his belly button, and also weird markings just surrounding that said marking in his belly button. He's not so sure what even that is, but he begins to get this chill down his spine, as if there was something watching him. Naofumi would look around, but nothing would be there at all. The other 3 people that are currently there would look at him like he's crazy, wondering what is wrong with Naofumi, but Naofumi doesn't say a word. His confusion is overwhelming him until he hears a, low-tier roar. A roar that would then wake him up to whatever was going on. Out of nowhere, darkness would surround him entirely, and he would see a cage in front of him. But this cage in front of him would have a small fox. Yes, this fox had 9 tails, but it was a tiny fox, as if it were just some child, a baby. He's not so sure, but he walks up to the cage, and flashes of a more and more giant fox would then appear behind this baby fox. He'd be shocked to see this, but then still kneel down as if he was worried about this said being. he would reach his hand out, but just as he patted the fox on the head, he would snap back to what currently is his reality. Naofumi would look around and realize that whatever he read must have came to fruition, but where is he right now? He would soon learn exactly where he is when nobles and knights begin to approach them, explaining that the king wants to speak with all of them. Eventually, the king would speak to them, telling them exactly what's going on.
Listen, all of you were sent here for a reason. That reason is to save all of us from what we know as the waves. The waves of catastrophe are something that we all fear and dread, but you heroes are here to prevent. Who the hell are you?
Naofumi would be looked at by the king with contempt, not knowing who the hell Naofumi is and seeing that he has no weapon. Immediately, the king would come to the conclusion that Naofumi was an outsider, somehow trying to sneak in and get the privileges of the heroes. So he immediately is banished off, immediately sent away, and Naofumi is confused, not knowing what's even happening, but immediately being sent out into a world he knows nothing about. Naofumi would try his best to learn anything at all, but eventually a voice would come into his head, a soft voice, but at the same time, this voice was intimidating. It was odd, as if this voice was scary but cute at the same time. Naofumi would hear this voice and it would tell him that this world is far different than the one he would ever believe, far different than any that he would ever think. This world is, well, for heroes to thrive and everyone else to suffer. Naofumi is shocked to hear something like this, but the voice continues to speak, saying that Naofumi is a hero no matter what these other people have said. It's just that the hero that he is not very known and also wouldn't be very loved by the people around. Naofumi then realizes that the person or the thing talking to him is the nine-tailed fox, this fox-like creature that must be giving him some sort of power. Naofumi even questions the little fox, and the fox explains that the stronger Naofumi gets, the stronger he will get, and the stronger they both will get. But there's no guarantee that he would even want to give the power to Naofumi. How could he really trust someone like him? Naofumi questions what he means by that. What do you mean, someone like me? I don't understand. As Naofumi asks this, there is no voice that would return. The voice would go silent, and Naofumi would have to deal with whatever is ahead on his own. He would quickly realize that he doesn't have money, and that growing in strength is something that is very, very difficult. Naofumi would realize this when he would learn more and more about this so-called leveling system of the heroes, learning that whatever monster was within him and whatever he said was technically correct. The more Naofumi levels up, the more power that is available. But this power is all derived from what is known as the nine-tailed fox, other named as Kurama. Immediately, Naofumi would realize that it's gonna take him to basically kill monsters and defeat anything he possibly can think of to gain strength. But how is he even gonna do that? This Kurama, or this nine-tailed fox, doesn't want to give him any of his power, so what is he supposed to do? Well, Naofumi realizes that at the level of 10, he should be able to use some sort of power from Kurama, even though Kurama doesn't want or trust him entirely. But the goal at the end of the day would be full bonding with Kurama. If he's able to do that, the power of Kurama, or at least at the level that he's at, will be completely synced. Yes, when Naofumi levels up more and more, the stronger Kurama gets, but the scaling for Kurama is far faster than what Naofumi will ever gain, at least on his own. Naofumi immediately heads over to a weaponsmith, or at least a blacksmith, meeting a man by the name of Erhard. But quickly, he'd realize he has no money, so what is he supposed to really do? Exactly, he can't do anything. Naofumi would ask if there's any maybe old swords or old weapons that he could possibly use. Of course, Erhard, being the nice guy he is, he'll lend him something, and lend him something pretty weak, but at least something he can use to defend himself. This definitely would benefit Naofumi, because it would allow him to go out and start killing monsters. As he does this, he begins to gain material after material. Even though he's gaining things to sell, and gaining material-like stuff, Naofumi does know that he needs more than just money and materials and stuff like that. He does realize that he needs, well, people to fight with him. Of course, he would go out and try to find some people, but nobody would really ever be interested in helping Naofumi. Word got around that he was some sort of con artist, some fake hero, and eventually, well, an offer would come, but it's from somebody that he didn't really trust very much. A slave market owner would approach him and offer him some slaves. Naofumi not sure how to feel about this, especially because in his homeworld, obviously they would never think about doing something like that. Nonetheless, he would look around a little bit and eventually would come to the conclusion that he would need to pick something that, well, it doesn't cost that much money because he's kind of broke. Luckily, he's able to scrounge up just enough for this little creature. It's a raccoon girl by the name of Raftalia, and he's able to buy her and actually get a slave crest on her as well, which he doesn't know how he feels about this so-called slave crest. Nonetheless, though, he would help Raftalia out the best he possibly can, and eventually would try and cure her mild cold. But not having enough money for any medicine or anything like that, Naofumi wouldn't really know what to do. He would try his best to scrounge up enough money, and he would basically continue to do this over and over again. But eventually one night, while they were both sleeping, this aura began to extend from Naofumi, and a tiny bit of it would go within Raftalia, curing her of her flu, and Naofumi would have no idea what happened. Of course, the nine-tailed fox, or Kurama, would give some of his own power, or some of his own chakra, tailed beast chakra, to Raftalia, giving her a little bit of power, but also, and more specifically, curing her of her mild cold. This would only boost her experience by about 1 or 2 levels, so it would be practically unnoticeable. But luckily, Naofumi would see that she got over it, but Kurama would never actually fully admit to this. Well, after some time would pass, they would both start training more and more, and Naofumi would awaken about a partial amount of Kurama's power after hitting a level of 10. Naofumi would continue leveling up and feel that his strength has basically multiplied immensely. It seems like now Kurama himself is stronger, but also this would in turn make Naofumi a good bit stronger, being able to utilize some of Kurama's powers, not to the extent that, he could right now, because if he had full link with Kurama, he would be, we're talking 5 to 10 times more stronger or compared to what he is right now. But of course, Kurama is not willing to give him that much power, and if he did give him that much power without having a perfect connection, it would have definitely detrimental results. Nonetheless, Naofumi would begin to rack up more money and more items, and actually talk to Erhard about basically paying him back and also getting a weapon for Raftalia. He doesn't know how he really feels about this because she's just a child, really, but Naofumi says that she's under his protection and that she is basically learning to become a warrior, and she talks about all the time how she wants to help Naofumi the best she possibly can, especially after being helped from that slave market. Erhard would then point them in the direction of Loot Village, and eventually when they would head over there, they'd ask about any good places to level up or gain money. They would be pointed in the right direction, and Naofumi and Raftalia would head over there. Of course, Naofumi doesn't have the best of weapons, he's gotten a slight upgrade, but the strength from Kurama itself has given him a massive boost in terms of raw strength and just superhuman ability. Raftalia, on the other hand, being a pretty low level as well, only has some simple blade. Naofumi doesn't have the means of making a ton of money, but hopefully this would give him the amount of money he'll need eventually. he'll begin mining these ore pieces that are currently in the area and begin to basically rack up as much as possible. Naofumi would realize that this would gain him a good amount of money, but just as he's mining up all of these ores, he begins to sense something that is pretty strong. He would turn to see this two-headed dog monster beginning to approach both of them. Naofumi grabs Raphtalia and jumps away to try and get away from this monster, but it would lead them to having to fight. Naofumi would defend Raphtalia and can see that she is terrified. He would tell Raphtalia to just run away, to get away as quick as possible. Naofumi would be protecting something far weaker than himself. Kurama would see this and realize that Naofumi, maybe he's not the worst person. Of course, this is a younger Kurama, a more impressionable Kurama. It's not like this, he's a fully grown nine-tailed fox where he's already gone through a ton of war and catastrophe and stuff like that. He's impressionable, but he does remember what has happened in his past lives, so it wouldn't be to the point where he wants to link entirely, but he decides that he gives Naofumi a little bit more power, allowing him to defeat the monster with relative ease. Naofumi is shocked to see how strong he is, taking his sword, plunging it into the two-headed monster, and Raphtalia herself basically disobeying what the orders were from her quote-unquote master, and she would attack the monster as well, finishing it off, and they both get substantial amounts of experience points. Naofumi quickly realizes the power that he got was from Kurama itself, actually not just the base amount that he would get from leveling up, but voluntarily Kurama giving him power. He thanks Kurama, or thanks the nine-tailed fox, and this is when Kurama would reveal his actual name, so now Naofumi would know the name of the nine-tailed fox. Of course, the nine-tailed fox would not really want this thanks from Naofumi, not really wanting to drop the persona of this feared or fearful fox, even though Naofumi has seen the small version, the small, basically tiny baby version of the Ninetales. Nonetheless, Naofumi would know that there is some sort of connection with the nine-tailed fox that will remain within him, and hopefully over time they can build that connection stronger and stronger, and they can get stronger together in general. Luckily, they still have all of this money to make, and they have a ton of these gems, eventually selling them all and allowing them to get some more, like some place to stay until the first wave, but also, well, some money in general. They need food, they need weaponry, they need stuff like that, and this allows them to do just that, getting Raphtalia new things, getting Naofumi new things. Nothing crazy high quality, but at least to the point where, well, they're not feeling too far off in terms of getting ready for this next wave. Over the course, though, of obviously the next couple weeks, Naofumi would train, level up with Raphtalia, and gain immense amounts of power, gaining up to a level of about 25 to 30 and Raphtalia to about a level of 23. Naofumi being able to fight for himself, and so can Raphtalia, allows for them to basically level up at a pretty rapid rate, far faster than they ever would in canon. Naofumi's connection with Kurama would grow stronger and stronger, but he would realize that there would be an overwhelming amount of power if he overdoes it. If he consumes too much of the chakra, or this tailed beast chakra that he knows of based on his HUD menu, he might actually lose control to a certain extent. Naofumi knows that he'll need to restrict himself, and that if he uses too much of that said power, it might corrupt him to the point where he goes, well, haywire, not knowing exactly how to stop it. Luckily, Kurama has no intention of doing such a thing, because frankly, if Naofumi dies, then, well, he kinda goes with him, so he doesn't necessarily want Naofumi to die. And knowing of what would happen if one of the heroes did die, let's just say, not too fond of the idea of making the waves 10 times harder because of a hero dying. Nonetheless, after all that time would pass, it'd be finally about a day or two away from the first wave. Naofumi would hear from Erhard that they should check in the Dragon's Hourglass to see how much time exactly is until that next wave, and in doing this, it would lead them to have an interaction with the other heroes. Of course, this interaction is never the greatest. I mean, they're kind of assholes, pricks, not nice people by any means. And they just think they're so much better than Naofumi, thinking that he's still some sort of fake. Nonetheless, Naofumi will show power that they've never really seen. Of course, he gets this red bubbly cloak type of aura when he enters into that nine-tailed fox state, but he shows off an immense amount of physical strength. Of course, the other heroes would have most likely not see it because, well, Naofumi would end up protecting the village of Lutz, and he decides to do this when the wave would begin, and the other heroes would fight the main boss. Naofumi would see various monsters. We're talking zombies, we're talking skeletons, anything you can really think of, it would be there. Naofumi would eliminate them relatively easily, but there's one thing that would not sit well with Naofumi is when the knights begin to send a barrage of attacks toward Loot Village without any care in the world for himself, Raphtalia, and anybody else that lived there. Naofumi would get extremely frustrated with this, and Raphtalia would feed off of this frustration, and her power would ramp up like crazy, as if she was using the anger of the nine-tailed fox to attack. She immediately would land a blow to one of the knights, and the knight would not be able to block so easily, getting struck pretty hard initially, and Naofumi would have to peel her off of him. Naofumi would tell her to calm down, that it's okay, that there was no hurting them in this scenario, that he would have had it protected anyways. Of course, he just wants things to calm down, but the knights want the exact opposite, forcing Naofumi's hand, and Naofumi is forced to knock all of them out in protection of the village and also Raphtalia. Of course, the nine-tailed fox would respect this decision out of Naofumi. Naofumi's basically shown a lot of characteristics that the nine-tailed fox would want to see from a host and would want to see from somebody that actually cares about what's going on around him. Of course, he protected this village that was very good to him, which is a good thing for the nine-tailed fox to want to see. An impressionable nine-tailed fox, or a child version of the nine-tailed fox, like I said before, is extremely impressionable. So if Naofumi acts like he doesn't care, or acts like the other heroes, let's just say the nine-tailed fox will not be giving him his power, well, to the extent that he could be giving him his power. Nonetheless, after helping out the villagers and after saving basically a village entirely from the barrage of attacks from the knights and also the monsters, Naofumi would be praised as a hero. They'd allow him to stay there for free and without any real regard for money at all. Naofumi would appreciate this and say that he would try his best to volunteer money as much as possible, but of course, Loot Village being Loot Village, they are a bunch of really nice people. That's just who they are. Nonetheless, though, Naofumi would never get an invite to basically have this grand dinner because, of course, none of them even care about him, and they believe that he's just a fake hero. But some things would definitely occur that would unsettle Naofumi and definitely make him feel some type of way when, well, Motoyasu, Mine, and some other knights would show up saying that they claim this village for their own in the name of Motoyasu. Naofumi approaches them and says that just won't fly. That can't be the case, and he unfortunately cannot allow this. Of course, they would argue back and forth, and Mine would say that they don't have a choice, eventually leading to a shadow appearing and showing them something. Assumingly, we can assume that the shadow showed her basically that she can't do what she's about to do. Naofumi would eventually hear from her mouth that it didn't matter anyways, and that they'll make a little bit of a deal. Motoyasu versus Naofumi, whoever wins can keep Loot Village. If Motoyasu wins, then it's their village to keep, and that if Naofumi wins, then they'll go away. Naofumi is basically shaking his head and not really enjoying this interaction, and not really wanting to deal with these people, but still would take on the challenge to fight the spear hero Motoyasu. Of course, Motoyasu would come out the gates in their little duel in this arena quick and extremely fast. Naofumi, thinking that Naofumi would not be able to take any blows by any means, he begins to just try and strike down Naofumi with his strongest attacks. But when he does this, it basically hits Naofumi and he's able to brush it off relatively easily. He can feel the power of the nine-tailed fox and the tailed beast chakra flowing within him way stronger than usual. It's not that he's grown in levels, or of course he has, but it's not that he's grown in levels and that's why he has more power. It's actually because Kurama decided to give him more strength. A more deeper tone voice of Kurama would then speak to Naofumi, telling him to wipe the smug look off of this dude's face so that they can get on with their daily routines of training, eating food, and basically going along with their life. Naofumi slightly smiles to see that, and happy that Kurama has come around, but Kurama denies the fact of fully coming around and that he's just annoyed with this prissy so-called hero. Naofumi would then reach out and immediately grab Motoyasu with these flaming like tendrils, as if Motoyasu is being stuck in place. A ton of versions of Naofumi would then appear as if he was making something known as shadow clones. Naofumi not knowing what these things are, but the use of tailed beast chakra would allow him an abundance of shadow clones, overwhelming Motoyasu in a matter of seconds. Naofumi would even question this power while fighting against Motoyasu. The fight would quickly be over, and even with interference or tried interference of mine, it would not be useful by any means. The fight would end, and Motoyasu would be on the ground, weeping or out cold. Naofumi would ask Kurama about what other powers does he currently have. He's only used the pure strength part of it. He's never used what the chakra truly means. Kurama begins to explain that back in his own world and way back when he actually was properly used, unlike what we're doing right now, in which Naofumi rolls his eyes as it's being said, Kurama explains that there was different techniques that could be used, different techniques that can be utilized by using chakra. But since Naofumi and basically this world is a far bit different, the chakra is derived from tailed beast chakra alone, giving him really potent chakra. But obviously, since he doesn't know how to use chakra in general, it would definitely be something he would need to learn. He begins to question Kurama about how to use it. Can he be taught? Can anything happen? But Kurama says that now that he's in this world, there should be written scripture about how to use it. There should be different versions of and different styles that he can use, and it most likely will be based off of whatever this world kind of runs on. Basically hinting at the idea that whatever magic affinities he has is very similar to what was in his world in the past. Basically saying that his quote-unquote tailed beast chakra nature will be based off of his magical affinities. With that said, the fight is finished up and the fight is over. Obviously, Naofumi would keep his side of the bargain at the fact that he gets to keep Loot Village safe and sound. Of course, Mine would try to argue that he cheated, saying that he had multiple people fight and blah blah blah, but this would be debunked immediately by one of the shadows, saying that is part of his powers, so that does count as a win for Naofumi. Naofumi would smile to hear that at least someone has his back, excluding, of course, Talia and basically his demon fox that is currently within his stomach, but nonetheless, that is beyond the point. Of course, they would leave, give the word to Loot Village, and they would be ecstatic to hear this. Naofumi would then begin to think that maybe it's time for them to take a little trip. Maybe it's for the best that he heads out and hopefully can find some new ways of making some money. Naofumi would eventually search for that idea, and the slave market owner would give him one of those ideas, and that's to buy something known as a gacha egg. A gacha egg that would provide him with a monster that may or may not be a Fallolial. But we all know this is always so rigged and completely rigged, so it's gonna be a Fallolial. So it ends up being a Fallolial, but the Fallolial is far different than any they've seen, growing at a rapid rate and then eventually just becoming a full-grown Fallolial, and then out of nowhere becoming a really fat Fallolial. Naofumi, not really knowing what to even think, thinking that maybe this would be great to get a cart and maybe they can truck along some supplies and go out to some trading or maybe make some money like that. Quickly, that idea would get flipped on its head when that giant Filolial would turn into a little girl, but that's also something Naofumi has no idea what's going on. But quickly, that answer would be fulfilled by a magic shop owner, beginning to say that she is basically something that we know as a transforming monster, and that they're gonna need some magical clothing, and which means they'll need some magical thread. Of course, they don't have that. They talk to everybody. That doesn't even occur. They don't have that. So they decide that they're gonna have to take a little trip. But during this time, the magic shop owner decides to help them out and talk about their affinities. Raphtalia having an affinity for light magic, but Naofumi, interesting enough, having an affinity for healing and support magic, which he's kind of confused about. And even Kurama chimes in, thinking that that's not what he thought he would have, but that would make sense. When he healed Raphtalia, it was as if it was in a matter of seconds. It was just instantaneous. So maybe that does make sense to a certain extent, but the fact that he's only support and healing magic, that's kind of, well, lame in Kurama's opinion. Of course, Naofumi doesn't take this personally and thinks that there is a bright side to most things, and he hasn't really, been tainted with that whole brooding aspect of himself that he would in the original canon. This would then eventually lead them to taking a little bit of a journey. That journey would eventually lead them to basically getting this so-called thread, but it would be more leaning toward the idea of getting, well, you could say this magical gemstone that they kind of needed. During this trip, they would come across a cave. This cave would reveal that this thing known as the curse seed was completely gone, which Naofumi himself and his whole party can assume that's probably not the best thing to hear. But nonetheless, they continue trucking on, finding something known as a new. But luckily, the new is going to fall down relatively quickly with the power of Raphtalia, Naofumi, and also Philo, who is the Filolial, and the combination of Naofumi's, well, support magic. Ironically enough, being able to share the Tailed Beast chakra, or the chakra from the Nine Tails, with his party members gives them all superhuman natural abilities, basically giving them superhuman strength and just a good amount of boost in terms of power. Taking down a monster like that would be relatively easy, and getting the gemstone for themselves would be easy as well. They take the gemstone back, and obviously they handle whatever business they have to handle in terms of getting nice clothing for Philo. But after that is said and done, the real stuff is about to begin. They come across a trader. They speak with that said trader, and that trader needs some help. Of course, they would have bandits attack them, but let's be honest, it's a wash. The bandits would get absolutely destroyed, and frankly, they'd be terrified of a giant bird that could possibly eat their heads off. Naofumi would obviously help out anybody he possibly could on the way, but the trader specifically is someone that Naofumi was definitely interested in. He wants to make some money, and the trader would be a good way to do that, giving Naofumi various different ways of basically learning how to make that said money, so this would be perfect for them in the long run. Naofumi would eventually get his first mission, making Philo and Raphtalia relatively excited. And Kurama is kind of indifferent about it. He's kind of just chilling, waiting for something crazy to actually happen. And luckily, something crazy is about to happen. Naofumi and his party would be sent on a little bit of a mission. They'd be sent to deliver some herbicide to a nearby, village. When they arrive, though, they see that, herbicide, let's just say there's gonna be a need for a little bit more than just herbicide. He begins to head toward that village and speak with the people there. They begin to learn about exactly what occurred, and let's just say it's not something good. Of course, it has to do with the spear hero Motoyasu, someone that brought basically a cursed seed to their village, saying that they'll cure their famine. in which it did for about a day, and then it turned into a giant monster and started attacking the villagers. Definitely not what you want out of a seed. Nonetheless, Naofumi was sent here for that reason alone. He was sent here to make sure that these things got cleaned up. Naofumi, not exactly knowing how to change and make sure everything is okay, but he's definitely going to give it a shot. I mean, he has this herbicide and he has some power from the nine-tailed fox and then has some people to help him, so hopefully he can enhance this herbicide to a certain extent with some sort of healing or support magic. So that's exactly what he goes down to do. Him and his party would head down to basically fight this giant monster, and luckily with Naofumi learning how to actually boost their power now using his support magic and a combination of his own chakra, Naofumi is able to boost their power to a certain extent. On top of that, he actually learned how to do basic shadow clones, and yes, he was able to use it against Motoyasu, but that was more in a, well, I gotta get this done, and a huge adrenaline boost of power from Kurama himself. Luckily though, he's able to create some shadow clones, allowing for some distractions, and his goal is to get this herbicide as deep as possible within the roots of the plant. That's exactly what he tries to do by actually reaching out his chakra-like hand deeper and deeper within the plant. Rautalia and Philo are able to cut a section out, so he's able to smash the bottle within the roots, and luckily with his support magic and flat out his healing magic, it's able to boost the herbicide to the extent that it's able to destroy the plant entirely. Now Naofumi would then dissect some of the seeds and make sure that they are diluted to the point that they can be used as regular seeds that are just, well, better to use for food growth. Naofumi would present this to the villagers, and luckily it seems like this is actually a big plus for all of them. Naofumi has used so far the power that he's gained from the nine-tailed fox for the greater good of everybody else, not really the greater good of, well, himself. Luckily, he's shown this great deal of unselfishness because it made the nine-tailed fox a lot more attached to Naofumi. It reminded him of someone that he can't really put his finger on it, but definitely someone that he used to know. The nine-tailed fox is definitely fond of people like Naofumi. He doesn't really remember in his past life what that truly meant or what type of person was before, but nonetheless, he does enjoy being in the presence of someone as selfless as Naofumi. After some time helping out the village and doing everything they can, they're eventually sent off to another mission. This mission doesn't really involve fighting at all, it's just them bringing a package to a nearby hot spring, which is basic enough because, I mean, it's a nearby hot spring, so they were able to finish that up with relative ease, and the next day, after getting some rest in, that Naofumi was very, very persistent about getting, they actually have another mission. This mission is going to be a little bit different. There's this plague going on in this village, and they have no idea what's going on. Of course, the idea of what's happening would eventually be revealed as a dragon being killed above them on a mountain, and, well, that dragon was slain because of Ren, the sword hero. The sword hero killed this dragon, didn't clean it up, and now it's causing a massive plague because it's more or less rotting above an entire village. This is, of course, a problem, and Naofumi takes his party, and obviously himself, and a giant wagon up there to actually clean up this so-called dragon. As he arrives and as he gets prepared to clean this dragon up though, the dragon would awaken in a zombified form. Immediately Philo would go into this fit of rage, going to attack the dragon. Of course, getting a boost from Naofumi as well from the tail beast chakra, but Philo would be swallowed whole. Naofumi would look in complete shock, and rage would boil within Naofumi. The former rage that was within the nine-tailed fox begins to basically come to a head. Naofumi begins to get frustrated, mad, and this aura overwhelms him, terrifying to the point that even Raftalia flinches at what's going on. Multiple tails begin to arrive, and his skin begins to turn this dark red. He now then screams in complete, basically, agony. Naofumi is now something else, and not even Kurama can necessarily stop this. He's taken on too much power, and he's taken it on because of the rage that was still laying dormant within not only Naofumi, but also the nine-tailed fox. Immediately, Naofumi would wind up a giant tailed beast bomb that would get sent flying at, well, the giant dragon that is completely zombified. The tailed beast bomb would land cleanly, putting a hole straight through his stomach and begin to vaporize the dragon from the inside out. Naofumi would continue to press on, shooting anything and everything at this dragon. Even flames and various other crazy chakra-based attacks would be sent toward this so-called dragon. A regular tailed beast bomb would not be enough. This odd-looking volcanic version of it would arrive as well, as if he was mimicking the dragon's flames, burning and incinerating this dragon to practically nothingness. Naofumi would then continue to rage on, but luckily Raftalia is there. Raftalia was there to calm him down and have him relax, and points out that Philo is still alive, pointing toward the rubble, and Philo is there, still, well, relatively okay, just with a couple feathers singed. Naofumi would then just get out of the transformation and immediately pass out. Naofumi would be brought to a nearby, that same nearby village, and be helped back to recovery. He would be exhausted, hurting. His whole body would be completely just tired. But luckily, with extreme amounts of regeneration and basically healing factor from Kurama, he'll be back up and running in just a matter of days. Naofumi would wake up, and Kurama would lecture him immediately about the power that he was intaking and about the emotional toll that is going to be put upon him. He not only needs to get stronger within this world, but he also needs to get stronger mentally. Whatever's burdening him, he needs to make sure that he confronts it. That's all Kurama has to say, as if Kurama is this wise mentor. And in a way, Kurama kind of is getting to that point, because the more he levels up, the older in age and basically in potential Kurama is actually getting. Luckily, Naofumi realizes this and takes this very seriously, but at the same time is just happy to see that Raftale and both Philo are uninjured and unharmed. After some rehabilitation within the village that he's currently at, Naofumi realizes that the power that he holds is extremely potent. And he does realize he needs to get way stronger to make sure that he can maintain this power. That Kurama himself may not be evil, may not be angry, and may not be sabotaging Naofumi at this point, but at the same time, Naofumi could sabotage himself by basically allowing his emotions to overwhelm him and then feeding off of Kurama's past anger that he had before. Naofumi would realize this relatively quickly and realize that he would be putting his entire party in danger if he doesn't figure this out. So he promises that he will, and they begin to head off back toward Melromark to check in on when this next wave will eventually begin. Naofumi and his party would head off and eventually come across a young girl by the name of Melty. Him not really knowing much about Melty and not knowing much about the royal family, of course, would allow her to basically hop in the carts and head off toward Melromark and make sure that she gets home relatively safe. When they arrive, though, Naofumi would be attacked by Multiyasu once again, being told that he should never keep captive slaves, and not only that, he must have kidnapped Melty. And Melty immediately denies this, saying that that is a ridiculous statement. Multiyasu argues, saying that he's not actually a hero, that he's just some demon. A demon fox lives within him based on the rumors, and that's the only reason why he's even strong. Naofumi shrugs this off and just keeps remembering and reminding himself of basically ignoring this unwanted hate. Of course, this is exactly what they want. They want to make him look like a demon, like a monster. That's exactly what they want, so he's going to avoid that entirely, telling his party that they need to head off before things get out of hand. Of course, this is perfect in the regard of what he wants, but Motoyasu refuses to allow him to leave, but Melty has other ideas, telling him that if he doesn't allow basically the nine-tailed hero to leave, that there will be a problem with basically him and also royalty itself. Naofumi, hearing the name of the nine-tailed hero, is completely shocked, turning around and questioning if she knows that he's truly one of the heroes. She says yes, that her mother has confirmed it, and that he or people or a nine-tailed hero is to not show up for thousands of years unless absolutely needed. The nine-tailed fox was a monster, a demon of some sorts that, well, wasn't controllable by many at all. Some would try and forcibly control it, others would try to befriend it, but the same result would always lie with the person trying to dead. Naofumi, hearing this, is shocked, but realizes that this is exactly what he knew from the very beginning. The nine-tailed fox is nothing to be taken lightly, is nothing to be seen as some friendly pet. At the end of the day, Naofumi knows that there is a boundary between them, and of course he wants to have a perfect link with Kurama, but it's never going to be that simple. It won't be until he's far stronger and until he has complete control. And maybe the perfect sync of Kurama and Naofumi will never happen, or maybe it will. Nonetheless, though, Naofumi is going to strive to make sure that perfect sync does occur so that nobody else will get hurt and that he has the power to defeat these waves. He's found that there's more to this world than just these people believing that he's no hero. He's found people that he cares about, even if people around him may see them as quote-unquote slaves. But at the same time, these are the only people that he can actually trust. On top of Kurama to a certain extent, of course, but nonetheless, he ignores the back and forth that he basically is hearing, and he heads to the Dragon Hourglass to see what's occurring. He does hear from Melty herself and from other people that there is a way of getting a class upgrade, especially for the partners that he currently has. Being that Raphtalia is already at level 40 and Philo is approaching level 40 very, very quickly, Naofumi feels like this would be a perfect time. But unluckily, he's told by the church that it will never be allowed to get his class upgrade there, so he's forced elsewhere. Naofumi wants to determine if he should go get their class upgrades somewhere else, maybe some other country, if that's even possible, or basically stay here and train up to at least level 40 and then have him train up to a certain extent so that they can all be stronger. Naofumi's not sure, but quickly realizes that there isn't that much time left, and maybe just making sure that Raphtalia is fully trained, and also Philo is up to the max of 40, on top of him being as high level as possible so that they'd be ready for the next wave, will probably be the best course of action. So that's exactly what they begin to do. Train, and continue to train, but eventually they'd catch wind of this refugee camp during their little scouts and also training. This refugee camp would be basically telling them that they're starving, they need food, and it's all because of Itsuki. The bow hero seemingly started a revolution, but then at the same time left a corrupt government in power, leading them to exactly where they are. This is something that Naofumi is very frustrated with, and immediately after helping these people goes down and meets with Itsuki and also Ren, telling them exactly what occurred. Of course, in the beginning, they don't believe him at all. What is he? He's just some fake hero anyways. But luckily, he's able to get through to Ren, at least to a certain extent, and then Itsuki follows suit. They realize what he's saying and basically realize that the story that he's giving is kind of flawless. It's kind of perfect, so they can't really argue with it. Will that make them better heroes? Well, only time will tell. But nonetheless, he goes along with what needs to be done, training and things like that, and getting prepared for the next wave. And just as though another 24 hours would pass, the next wave would eventually be upon them. This wave, though, will be far different. Maybe in the very beginning, they didn't think so, but it would eventually come to something far, far greater than Naofumi could possibly realize. While defending Loot Village, there would be nothing to call home about. Nothing really crazy happening. He's just normally protecting the village and normally doing, well, the simple things. Protecting the village, making sure everybody's safe, and the monsters itself are pretty weak, at least in comparison to his party. Eventually, he would realize, though, that the main boss is not dying. The main boss isn't dead. So he begins to take his party, and after being confirmed that everybody should be fine at Loot Village, he heads over to the main boss, immediately seeing the other three heroes arguing about how they need to fight and defeat the Flying Dutchman. Naofumi is completely confused and questions them, immediately asking what the heck do they even think they're doing? Why does it matter how they defeat him as long as they come up with a way that actually works? Naofumi would eventually point out the shadow beneath the Dutchman, immediately Rautalia stabbing toward it, revealing something kind of terrifying. A Soul Eater. A Soul Eater, more or less, is extremely powerful, an extremely powerful monster at that, but the other heroes seem to be kind of out of the league entirely anyways. Naofumi and Rautalia and also Philo would attack the Soul Eater, and they're actually able to defeat it. Naofumi feeling the superhuman strength and powers that he currently has, and frankly, he begins to realize that he outmatches these other heroes by a long shot. Of course, he doesn't know too much chakra-based things, he doesn't know really any techniques, and he still needs to find some scrolls and other magical, basically books to teach him said things, but luckily he does know some sort of shadow clone technique, and that's really about it. But after this whole ordeal, he'll make sure to learn more and more techniques that were from originally the Nine-Tailed Fox's world. Naofumi would continue and basically obliterate the Soul Eater, but after that Soul Eater is defeated, another one would immediately show up as if they were just duplicating. Naofumi gets ready to attack this one as well to just destroy it as quick as possible, but just as he goes to strike it, someone else appears. These weird dagger-like basically beams would come strike through the Soul Eater, tearing into it and killing it on impact. Just as he looks up, this woman begins to float down. Two twin-bladed war fans she was holding and a black kimono around her. This was no monster. Well, in a way it was, but she was like them, human. She was like a hero. Look at her weapons. Her weapons have that same gemstone that these other people have. Naofumi having that gemstone within his body, but he's seen the gemstone on the other heroes' weapons. He immediately stares at this woman. This woman introduces herself as Glass. She's from a different world, but that's not what was going to be told. All she says is that the four heroes in front of her need to die. Naofumi is in complete shock as a ton of these light beams begin to get sent toward him, Rautalia, Philo, and everybody else. He immediately puts out his hand to try and block all of them as all of these beams begin to collapse onto him and all the heroes and their parties. But luckily, he's able to get his hand out there to support and protect everybody around them. But how long can Naofumi really hold this person off? Can Naofumi really go head to head with this mysterious woman by the name of Glass? Can he even fight her with these other heroes completely just, well, useless? Well, you're gonna have to find out in part 2 of What If Naofumi was the legendary nine-tailed hero. If y'all enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, leave a sub, and comment down below, all that good stuff. Normally I try to make these episodes, or at least part 1 of the Shield Hero What Ifs, about an hour-ish long. I know I only got to about 50 something minutes, but that's what I try to do. So if y'all enjoy those longer episodes, make sure to show some love. And if you want to see longer episodes, in the future for other stuff, let me know as well. But this is kind of just the pattern I go with Naofumi stuff. Nonetheless, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope all of y'all have an amazing day. Later.